Jeremiah just ran to drop off attendance. He'll be back.
Perfect. Okay. I'll make announcements while he's doing that. Okay, everyone. Some quick pieces of administrative data. Number one, Ollie. Hey, what's up? These things go away, get silenced. We do not see them. All right, we only have 3 presenters, so that's a good deal. In terms of, we'll have 3 and then we'll be to lunch. So number one, all of your peers, colleagues, friends, folks who are presenting today, I think all 3 have been working on these projects since October-ish, so they know quite a bit more than they can present in 15 minutes. So your job as audience members is to think about some questions you might want to ask that will allow them to share more than what they can in 15 minutes, because there's more that they know. And that allows us as faculty members to know just how deeply they understand their topic. So that would be very helpful if we listen closely and get some good questions ready for them at the end. All right, so without further ado, our first presenter here this afternoon is Kaya Kendall.
My name is Kaya Kendall, and this is Editing Techniques in Reality TV. While The Real World is often known for being one of the first reality TV shows, it was the release of Survivor with an average of 28 million viewers per episode that sparked popularity within the genre, Rosenfield 2024. It has grown to be a multi-million-dollar industry, as it is cheaper to produce than other programming and easily draws in so many viewers. According to English professor Neil Say, common characteristics of reality TV are common people as opposed to professional actors, no predetermined plot, and no scriptwriters. However, there is some well-known speculation of reality TV shows faking it due to producer decisions or editing, Chan 2012. So after thinking about this fake aspect of reality TV, the next question to ask is, how do the editing techniques create fakery, in reality TV create fakery, and how can this be screened for? While some fakery might come from producer interference, the scope of this project is specifically fakery through editing. So in order to answer this, there are a few different sub-questions that need to be answered first. These are, what is the definite fakery? What does the filming look like on reality TV? And what are the editing techniques which create this fakery? Starting with the first question, fakery is defined by the Journal of Media and Cultural Studies as an attempt to conceal the origins of information that must contain a degree of human intentionality to be considered fake. Next, filming often involves pre-recorded footage or longer clips of footage which isn't included in the final cut. According to reporter Charles Trepanney in an article on Shark Tank, in a typical pre-taped episode, pitches and negotiations can last up to 90 minutes before it's edited into a 10-minute segment for television. This evidence of original raw footage being edited down is important for the scope of this project, and it connects right into the next sub-question. Editors have the ability to rewrite the story. So, what are the common editing techniques used to do this? In her honors college thesis, Scripted Stereotypes in Reality TV, Paulette Strauss notes that techniques editors use is music, which can depict things like tension or suspense during certain moments. Strauss also notes on screen time, saying that if a character is a fan favorite, they're often chosen for more commentary and screen time, Strauss 2018. Finally, 2 sources in the professional field, Thomas 2013 and Butler 2014, agree that the way a scene is cut and spliced together is a way editors can mold footage. So, the 3 editing techniques commonly used in reality TV are music, screen time, and the cutting of a scene. So drawing from these sources in the professional field, we know that there is fakery. It is also clear that much of this is achieved through editing. However, there is a lack of research about how these techniques actually directly achieve this fakery. How does something like music create something that is evidently fake? This is the gap that my research project intends to fill, and there are no studies in the professional field to have looked at this before. In order to answer my research question, I will be using a content analysis to gather significant information and fill my gap. It aligns well with my project as it was informed by a similar study done by Paulette Strauss, where the author used a content analysis to find data about each contestant on The Bachelor to analyze and make conclusions about. I am using both qualitative and quantitative data in my method, where I will be screening for, recording, and analyzing the editing techniques used in reality TV. In order to make this project impactful, I chose to screen based on an article in Time magazine about the most influential reality TV seasons. This article included shows like Survivor, Love Island, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, The Bachelor, and Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So I chose these 5 shows to screen as I believed they would be current and well known to society. To get my sample, I then randomly selected 2 episodes from the highest rated season of each show. I went through each episode, recorded each time there was an editing technique, and labeled it so I could easily come back to that moment later on. If there was one character, I did not quantitatively record screen time, but I did record significant differences in character appearance. If there was one character who was shown in a majority of scenes and another who was only shown a couple of times, I recorded it. I then took all this data and compared it across episodes to see certain patterns and differences. After identifying these techniques, I also went back and analyzed the meaning of each technique within their context to see what influence they had on a scene. So while completing the screening, I was really looking for these 3 editing techniques so as to see their creation of fakery within a scene. I specifically focused on cliffhanger cuts as I believed they would be clearer and more impactful for this project. Again, fakery is defined as an attempt to conceal the origins of information that must contain a degree of human intentionality to be considered fake. In the context of this project, the origins of information will be the raw footage gathered during the filming of reality TV. Any techniques used would therefore be concealing the origins of information in some way. Looking at how this concealment creates fakery by screening for these techniques effectively bridges the gap between fakery and reality TV and the influence that editing techniques have on this fakery. Therefore, my method aligned well with answering the question, how does the editing of reality TV create fakery, and how can this be screened for? So, I screened season 20 of Survivor as it was the highest rated on IMDb. In episode 12, I recorded music playing 7 different times. It is important to note that background music played mostly throughout the entire episode, so I only recorded music timestamps when there was no music right before it, or its genre was significantly different from background music. There were 2 cliffhanger cuts, one being at the voting ceremony right before the reveal of who was going home. In episode 12, Russell, Rupert, Danielle, Parvati had the most screen time, and there was less focus on Sandra and Colby. In episode 13, while using the same distinction for music, I recorded music playing 9 times. There were 0 cuts and cliffhangers, and the screen time was more evenly distributed, yet still lots of focus on Russell and little on Colby. For each show, I had to change the way I chose the season to be screened, due to a lack of clear information on season ratings on IMDb. For Love Island, I chose season 5 because I had a majority of episodes in the top 10 highest rated episodes from all seasons. In episode 2, I recorded music playing 12 different times. There were 2 cliffhanger cuts, both of a conversation being cut off. And although there was no cliffhanger, it is important to note that when Joe was picking his girl in this episode, there was a long pause between him saying, "The girl I want to pick is," and Lucy, the girl he picked. Anne, Sharif, Michael, and Callum lacked screen time, while Joe, Lucy, and Tommy had more of the screen time. Finally, this episode had a next time at the end of the episode, with a preview of what was to come in the next episode. Episode 21 had 6 music timestamps and 1 cliffhanger cut. The characters with the most screen time were Maura and Molly May, and the characters with the least were Amber and Amberella. Similarly to Love Island, I chose season 5 of this show because some of the highest rated episodes were in season 5. In episode 5, I recorded only 4 timestamps as they were significantly different from background music that played throughout the entire episode. There were no cliffhanger cuts, and the characters with the most focus were Kyle and Lisa, compared to Yolanda and Brandy, who had noticeably less screen time. In episode 19, keeping in mind the distinction from background music, there were 6 times when music played. There was 1 cliffhanger cut, and the most screen time went to Kim and the characters involved in her drama. There was less focus on Eileen, who did not have a big part in Kim's storyline. For both of the episodes, I noted that there was a coming up section right before each commercial that provided a preview for later in the episode. These montages were significant as they were cut in a way that changed the trajectory of a conversation. For example, in the preview, one person might say something and then another person would directly respond to that line. However, when screening the episode, I noticed that during the actual conversations later on, the characters were responding to a different line than suggested in the preview. Season 28 was chosen to be screened for the show as it had the most episodes of any season listed in the top 10 highest rated. In episode 10, there were 30 music timestamps that I recorded and 1 cliffhanger cut because the conversation wasn't over. Maria received the most focus out of all the girls and was often prompted by the host to bring up certain topics or conversations with other characters. In episode 11, the finale, music played 59 times including intro and outro music. There were 6 cliffhanger cuts and no clear screen time difference between Daisy, Kelsey, and their time with Joey. Finally, I screened season 17 of this show as it also had the highest number of episodes in the top 10 highest rated than any other season. During episode 3, there was a total of 52 music timestamps. There were 3 cliffhanger cuts, and there was more focus on Scott and Courtney's storyline compared to the other characters. In episode 5, music played 50 times, and there was 2 cliffhanger cuts. Kim had the most screen time for both episodes, and there was the same coming up montage as The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, where the dialogue and responses didn't line up. So, reality TV is attempted to capture reality with no script, actors, or predetermined plot. All choices made to influence the scene through editing techniques are decided by the editors for a certain reason. By using my method to screen certain reality TV shows, I was able to find spots where these techniques were specifically included and see how they affected the show and created fakery by fabricating a more dramatized and entertaining experience. So after reviewing the data, there was a strong connection between the amount of music and cliffhanger timestamps within an episode to how dramatized it was. The Bachelor and Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which had the most timestamps, could be perceived as having the most elevated stories with the highest amounts of tension and entertainment. For example, in the finale of The Bachelor, many of the shots were Joey pacing around his room or flashbacks to his previous time with each girl as he was deciding who to choose. The Bachelor had one of the highest amounts of music and cliffhanger timestamps, and these directly altered each shot of original footage. There is clear evidence that the way music and cliffhangers were placed advanced the stories and created tension within the show. This aligns with what sources in the field state about how the molding of a scene is achieved by using techniques like cutting and music. During my research, the evidence gathered led to the new conclusion that editing techniques alter the original makeup of a scene and create characteristics that were not present in the original raw footage. So there are a few prominent examples of this conclusion which can be seen throughout different moments. In The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, there was a moment in episode 19 when Brandy was talking about her father's condition. During this, a melancholic piece of music started playing, which was likely placed so as to add an emotional touch to her story. In The Bachelor, many of the clips of Joey deciding which girl to pick often involve music with themes of tension and stress, which very clearly dramatizes the scene and keeps viewers engaged. In Keeping Up with the Kardashians, when Kim got on the phone and got a call that her mom had been attacked, there was high suspense music playing in the background. This moment also included a few cliffhanger cuts, and it is reasonable to say that these techniques were included so as to add more stress to the scene. During my research, I also found that screen time usually favored fan favorites. So what does this mean about editing? Well, let's go back to The Bachelor episode 10, where the girl with the most screen time, Maria, was a well-known and much-loved fan favorite. She was known to constantly engage in conversations and fights with other girls throughout the episode. This alone leads to the conclusion that fan favorites or characters who are prone to start drama receive the most screen time. This is similar to the screen time in Survivor, which heavily favored Russell and Rupert. Although not fan favorites like Parvati, Russell was constantly stirring up tension or purposefully miscommunicating with characters. This information about screen time makes sense according to what is known about fan favorites from the Strauss paper and the evidence about longer footage being edited down from the Shark Tank article. Likely, there was originally more footage gathered of these lesser-shown characters, and it was edited down as they were either not fan favorites or didn't engage enough with other characters. Shows with fewer amounts of music and cliffhanger cuts were arguably less entertaining, especially when comparing them to other shows within their genre. Following the same line of reasoning, fewer editing techniques means that there was less alteration and added characteristics through editing. Love Island, which had fewer recorded timestamps compared to the other dating show, The Bachelor, was less intense and it did not use many editing techniques. Also, Love Island did not use a cliffhanger cut at the end of episode 2 when Tommy picked Lucy. This differs from other shows with decisions involved, like Survivor, where a cliffhanger cut was used at the end of episode 12 right before it was revealed who got voted off the island. Compared to Keeping Up with the Kardashians, lifestyle show The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills was arguably less entertaining, with minimal tense or emotional music, as well as cliffhanger cuts. And both lifestyle reality TV shows used the coming up previews to tease what was to happen later in the episode. As previously mentioned, this involved cutting certain dialogue together, which altered the original outcome of the conversation compared to the conversation in real time. This is a key example of editing techniques directly altering or changing the original raw footage to create something new. Now, the gap in the professional field can be filled by the new conclusion that editing techniques used in reality TV create fakery through the alteration of a scene, which fabricates characteristics like tension and emotion that would not have been present without this editing. This is supported by the provided examples found within specific episodes which prove the strategic editing of scenes. My method effectively screened for each of these techniques and made it possible for me to see the effect they had on each scene and episodes overall. My two key limitations for this project were data collection and definitions. When applying my method to this project, I found that the amount of episodes I could screen was limited due to time, which may have led to selection bias within my results. The lack of definitions for terms I used was also a limitation. For example, I didn't have definitions for terms like tension, entertainment, or dramatization, which I used to support my line of reasoning and new conclusion. If I had had these term definitions within the context of reality TV, I would have been able to more confidently present my line of reasoning. For example, I could have said, this music clearly alters a scene and creates tension by doing A and B, and this tension was not present without this music, so the scene is therefore altered. For future research, I recommend finding concrete definitions of these terms within the context of reality TV or media. So, The results of this research led to the conclusion that editing techniques in reality TV create fakery through the alteration of a scene. Editors are adding a new element of emotion or pressure to a scene, and this conceals the origins of information, as these elements were not a part of the original raw footage. This conclusion effectively fits into the professional conversation, as it fills the gap between editing techniques and fakery in reality TV. Using a content analysis with qualitative and quantitative data for this research allowed me to fill this gap by finding the present prevalence of editing techniques in reality TV shows and then analyzing their effect on different scenes. This research provides viewers with deeper knowledge about what they are watching, and they might therefore become more wary about certain aspects. However, it is unlikely that editors will change their methods, as reality TV is a multi-million-dollar industry with viewers around the world. Here are my image citations. My sources are available upon request. Are there any questions?
Do you believe individuals, like I guess primarily on Survivor, their screen time was limited at the start of the season because they were more prevalent, or they made it longer in the actual show than other individuals that were given more screen time in the beginning of the show, or the season, I guess?
So you're saying, like, do you think it was different at the beginning of the show compared to the end of the show?
Because they made it further in the show, like they weren't voted out, like they might have talked as much as the others, have had the same amount of recordings.
I think that's true. There are a few examples of that in my research, especially when watching Survivor. I think that it's done specifically so that you become more attached to the characters who are going to be there for longer, as opposed to those you're only going to see. And this is true in other shows I didn't screen, such as Love is Blind.
Hello? Okay. So I have someone that I live with who watches Love Island relatively frequently. And I've always kind of been curious as to whether or not the actual, like, things or behaviors that people are doing in the show is also or is potentially scripted. And so I was wondering if you did any research in regards to that.
So that mostly deals with producer interference, and while that's something that I originally was interested in, it's harder to prove that using like a content analysis, so I mostly looked at editing. That's definitely another path of research I could have taken, but I think it's harder to prove that without interviews from past cast members or producers themselves.
What made you interested in this project?
This is a funny anecdote, but in the fall, I was watching a reality TV show, and I was looking at a scene, and it seemed kind of very, there was less continuity than, like, I kind of expected, and so I was wondering, maybe this shot of this person laughing or responding to this line was filmed at a completely different time than what they were responding to. And so I wanted to continue to look at that and see what I could find through editing, as I'm also interested in film, so that's interesting for me.
What was your favorite show that you watched?
The Bachelor, because I love Joey Grosseday, and it was the finale, so that was really interesting to watch.
I don't know if this was like in your scope of research or if you looked into this at all, but do you think the way producers ask questions, like for interviews, I heard that like affects like how the characters are portrayed into the show, and like that they can be given different characteristics? Do you think that is a factor?
I think, again, I can't answer because that wasn't in my research, but when I was looking at the Strauss article, she dealt a lot with stereotypes that reality TV characters based on maybe race or gender were forced to kind of omit, and I think that has to do a lot with producer interference.
Hi. I can't help but notice the conclusion that the UK, the Love is Blind UK, or Love Island UK, had less like emotive music. And I'm wondering if you could speak to whether you think that's because of viewership in UK, and whether there potentially, if there's some sociological differences in the viewership of UK versus the United States.
I think I would have had to compare that to the USA version. I noticed that there was more music during later episodes as opposed to beginning episodes, and I'm not sure why that is. but I'm also not an expert on psychological viewership in the UK. But again, I would have had to compare that to the USA version, which I did not do.
Do you have any opinions on like the morality of how they edit things and portray things?
I definitely do. I think it's hard to express those, especially with the popularity of the genre and how much money it makes and also how much viewership there is. I think reality TV would look a lot different if there wasn't this interference, and it maybe wouldn't be as entertaining for people. That was definitely proved by my research. But I think sometimes viewers are led on to believe certain things, and this is an immoral piece that wouldn't exist without this alteration and interference.
All right, Taryn's next. There she is. Session 2, go away, Kaya. Taryn, are you? Oh, you. I got you. Here, they fooled me. They had you at third. Would you like? Yeah, yeah. We're just getting set up. With the podium, you want to make sure you speak. Yeah, because the lapel will get you. You'll be heard better. You can go with that. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Can you text them? Or not just turn? Because otherwise, we'll
And then Taryn, I will be sitting, wait, sorry. No, sorry. I will be sitting in seat B with the time card. Okay. So I'll let you know when 10 minutes have gone by, and then when there's 13 minutes have gone by, we can do this. Yeah, of course.
This is on now.
Okay, presenter 2, everybody. Please welcome Taryn Trombley.